Right, you're welcome back.
They don't want to know what we talk about behind the cameras.
Absolutely not.
It's so interesting. It's a full program of its own, but it is exclusive to us.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
Let's get into the next discussion now.
Yes, indeed. Now, for years, electricity consumers across Nigeria have complained bitterly over the estimated or guesstimated billing system used by power distribution companies, describing it as an outrageous billing method used to rip them off.
Now, to resolve the conflict between distributors and consumers over tariff collection, the federal government approved a 38 billion naira bailout to electricity distribution companies you call DISCOS for the supply of prepaid meters. Now, the gesture, according to the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, was part of the power sector recovery program of the government. And he says this move will ensure that every consumer of electricity is provided with a meter.
Now, but the Nigeria Labour Congress, actually, the NLC has faulted federal government's bailout move, saying the power sector needs a holistic review of the privatization process instead of committing more funds to the sector for any reason at all, not even for prepaid meters. Well, we have a social commentator, Achike Chude, who's joining us to discuss this, a friend of the house. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, so the NLC is saying, look, instead of talking about giving another bailout to the power sector for whatever reason, it's even more important to look again at the whole process of whatever reason. It's even more important to look again at the whole process of privatization, which, you know, some have put a lot of question marks on. Is that really what we should be doing now?
I think it makes more sense. It makes a whole lot of sense. Do not forget that the privatization, the phased privatization of the power sector was supposed to, deliver. I think that was the end, purpose really, to ensure that there is a better supply of power to Nigerians. I think the argument then was that government could not continue to put money inside the sinking hole, and from their own experience, from what they told us, that public enterprises are not exactly living up to expectation, and so to free up the resources, for other important sectors of the economy, it was important to put this power infrastructure in the hands of private people who were supposed to be more knowledgeable and more committed to delivery of goods and services. And that was the essence. And so if the basis of that particular action has been violated and that they have not been able to deliver, and then now people are beginning to be nostalgic about the old NEPA, even with all its problems, it clearly tells you that something is wrong somewhere. So when people begin, the NLC makes, a statement such as this. Even the ULC also has been involved in picketing of DISCOS, for quite some time over some of the anomalies that we're seeing in that particular sector. And at a time, it would appear that indirectly the government also seems to acknowledge that it has not worked and it might not exactly work. Because the minister had, said when the issue came up that they don't want to go back to what it used to be before. That means that they find themselves in a situation where the contemplation of going back to where we were before is not exactly far from their minds. I remember attending, a power sector program at somewhere, I think at the University of Lagos, where we had the former Minister of Power, who was also one of the brains, Larry Babalola, who was also one of the brains behind the privatization scheme. He was a keynote speaker. And the conclusion, I was a guest, on the program itself, and after he had made his contribution, I also had to respond. And I told him, look, the tendency for government officials is to talk about availability of certain infrastructure or services. They don't talk about affordability. But if it is not affordable, it is not available. And the duty and responsibility of government is to ensure that services that are, provided for the welfare of the citizens and the benefit of the state are made available to the people. If it's not available, then the government has not fully discharged its responsibility, to the Nigerian people. Yeah.
All right. Now, in this whole expectation and shortfall in expectation, do we tie it to the issue of corruption, or we tie it to the issue of incompetence? What is really what is really the issue here that's making these companies not to perform?
Well, it will be strange, you know, to describe what is going on with these two words, corruption and incompetence, because privatization, from what we have been told, is supposed to remove all of this, corruption and incompetence and ineptitude and the rest, and all those other things that are, you know, associated with failure in providing public services and the rest. And that is the essence, because you see, they so much extol the virtues of, you know, private enterprises, the virtues of privatization and all of that. You know, but we have seen in this country, virtually every government enterprise, you know, that was privatized has ended up in failure. Not too long ago, a few years back, the Bureau of Public Enterprises, the body that was the midwife to the privatization exercise, told us that out of the over 350 public enterprises that have been privatized, only 10 of them are working minimally. Now, that's a frightening scenario. It tells you that, oh yes, about 10%, that's an official statement from the BPE. So what that tells you is that the entire privatization exercise is a failure. I mean, if
is it because there's something fundamentally wrong with privatization, or is it just that, you know, Nigerian factor that just, you know, makes a total mess of it? Ethiopia, for example, invested about $10 billion in, you know, building a new power plant. It's now an exporter of energy to other, you know, to neighboring countries, and Nigeria has expended far more than that.
Yeah, I think it's both. I couldn't help listening to the last discussion that you had, you know, over the regulation of NGOs and the rest, and I think the question or the observation made by you people here was that from what Sarah had said, about 7 trillion had been spent.
11 trillion.
About 11 trillion in the power sector. That is enough to give us deliver about 50,000 megawatts of electricity. And I'm not joking, because, you know, some years back, Brazil spent about, I think, $1 billion, and they delivered on 1,000 megawatts of electricity. We have spent far more than that, and what we have today is what we have during the Abacha administration.
It's still the same thing.
It's still the same thing. You know, it's a very pathetic situation. Of course, you know, you cannot divorce the issue of corruption in, you know, fundamentally from what is also going on. Corruption pre-privatization. You know, the fact that it was poorly done in the first place, they were in a hurry, and what happened is that I think they had taken, you know, perhaps a roll call of had an idea of the number of Nigerians that were hooked to electricity, and they had just done a little bit of calculation. You know, if with maybe 180 million Nigerians, maybe about 120 of them using electricity, if we charge an average of this is the amount of money we're going to get, you'll be surprised that it's something as arcane as that, as banal as that. I mean, that it figures in their computation. So, because there's no basis for what is going on.
So they were more focused on the profit.
The profit they're going to make.
Much more. I mean, this is a massive investment that you're having in the energy sector. You want to believe that a proper business plan was drawn up. You understand, was done by them, and that the auditing of infrastructure was done. Because I remember that the NUI, National Union of Electricity Employees, gave them a lot of heat. You know, when the government now had to use military personnel to all the, you know, power infrastructure in the country to force them, you know, to accompany the investors, you know, in the power sector and all of that. So they did auditing of all of these things. So why is it that all of a sudden they tell us there's no money to do this, there's no money to do that, and the rest? You know, it was shrouded in, and I think the former I think somebody who was that Obi Ezekwesili, who said at a time that the entire privatization exercise was also mired in corruption and controversy, starting from the Obasanjo administration and all the other administrations. So if the foundation is not right, what you expect ultimately at the end of the day is not what you're going to build on it. It's not going to turn out right. And that is the fundamental problems that we have been having. And then again, we seeing the virtues of, it's also convenient to talk about private enterprises and all of that, privatization and so on. But we forget again that even in the best economies, you know, democratic, you know, countries of the world where capitalism is in full flight, we see what happened with Fannie Mae We see what happened with some of the major banks, private-owned. You know, we tend to gloss over some of these failures of, you know, we saw what happened again with, I think, the motor industry in the United States, where the government had to spend so much money to bail out private enterprises and so on. So capitalism has its issues, and we have seen some of these issues. You understand? And again, for instance, in the area of water, it was privatized in some other countries, but governments are beginning to take back some of this essential public infrastructure from private hands, because somewhere along the line there are compromises. Public health, you know, public safety is compromised. Like in France, you know, when they had this issue with sewages seeping into, you know, the normal water channels, you know, for people at the rest. So government, and we keep on saying it, those people who tell us.
Those few incidents enough to, you know, say privatization in itself may not necessarily be the way to go.
I think you take every case, you know, at its merit, and it's, you know, again, it's just that they were in a hurry to take over public assets in this country, sell them on the cheap to their friends and collaborators in government. But the reality was that there are alternatives. For instance, the NUI, you know, gave an alternative arrangement to the government when it comes to, I mean, when they wanted to privatize. They said, look, you can, since all of us, I mean, we have been there in the industry for so long, when government has certain financial obligations to us, why not, you know, sell some of the shares? If you want to, you know, privatize and so on, why not let the workers also be part owners of the enterprise? And you know, a word of scripture says, where a man's treasure is, there his heart will be. So there was a very compelling argument, but the government didn't want to hear that. You can imagine a situation where the workers themselves had a stake, a bigger stake in the place where they were working. They would do everything to ensure, you know, that it is profitable. They would do everything to ensure that it works, because they have a stake in it. But of course the government didn't want to, because it was about selling national assets to certain private individuals.
I'm already tempted to puncture that, but I'm sure Mike has something to.
Well, when it comes to these arguments, what to benefit, there are always ideas, there are always perspectives to it. But from this standpoint where we are right now, if we have to take this step, where do we really start from?
What step exactly?
Is the step of ensuring that the power sector begins to work?
Well, you cannot keep on doing the same thing as you said and expect a different result. We've been on this path for quite some time. I mean, they've not been able to deliver on virtually anything. They've not delivered on, you know, distribution. They have not delivered on metering. Now, again, they had an MOU some years back with a 24-month timeline or 36-month timeline. They were not able to deliver on that. They were supposed to, within the timeline, ensure that every household in the country is adequately metered. Now they have given, and that tells you that what they have just done, the federal government has done 39 billion, you know, naira to private, to DISCOS, to provide meters for households. It's just a tip of the iceberg, because the Minister of Power himself, at a power event at the University of Lagos, had said that what was needed to privatize every home in this country is about 220 billion naira.
To privatize every home?
Sorry, to meter every home. To meter every home. It's about,
and of course there was a contract awarded in 2003.
Exactly, you understand?
What has happened even to the airing contractors? Nobody seems to have
I think it ended up, it became a judicial issue, ended up in court and all of that, you know, and then ultimately at the end of the day, they decided to settle out of court. The government was supposed to be owing quite a lot of money, but I think that has been, you know,
all right, so let's play the devil's advocate here. The DISCOS, the distribution companies themselves, are saying, look, without the cost-reflective tariff and adequate metering of the Nigerian power consumer, they cannot just guarantee steady supply of power.
I've talked about this for so long. There is no case there. There is no case. Because the reality, you know, I think between the last time that costs, you know, new costs are introduced and the very next time, I think it's a period of perhaps, is it 2-3 years or so, you know, when they have to talk about new tariffs and all of that.
Yes.
You know, but I can tell you that in the past 6 years or so, costs have gone up not less than 5 times in violation of that, you know, MOU. in violation. And so this is the argument that they keep on making. They have increased DISCOS. They have, you know, the government has found itself on the back foot several times, being blackmailed into allowing them to do whatever they want in terms of price cost increase. And they have done that. But at what point are we going to stop? As it is now, Africa, Nigeria, you know, has the highest, you know, cost-reflective tariff when it comes to electricity generation in Africa. You know, and so what it means again is this, and do not forget that if from transmitting power from generation to our homes, if, for instance, they have generated about 6,000, about 3,000, half of it, or 40% of it is lost. And so, but what you're paying, you're not just paying for the 4% that comes into the homes. You are paying for the entire 6. I mean,
even the one that is lost.
The power, you know, 3,000, extra 3,000 that is lost, you also have to pay for that. So you see that we are paying for what we have not exactly consumed.
Wow, it's mind-boggling when you hear some of these things and all of that. And these are things that are supposed to work very seamless, and is working seamlessly in other countries.
It's a very simple thing. You
Right.
want to
South
do
Africa
something,
is
give
already
out a
looking
contract,
beyond,
bring in the competent
40,000
people,
megawatts.
and they will build you,
I
you
know.
know, yes.
Exactly.